And this is the obvious conclusion because when a submissive is disobedient in hopes of experiencing their fantasy version of domination, punishment isn't what they're after. It's the intensity and power gap of being corrected, called out, and put back in their place. Before we jump into these strategies, it's important to note that although quite common, they're not the healthiest options here, okay? The 7 strategies we're going to cover here from the submissive side can be used consensually and respectfully within your power dynamic to convey playfulness, absolutely. But that's not the lens that I'm using to evaluate these techniques. The purpose of this perspective is to put language to what you might be experiencing in your dynamic. Whatever it is that's happening that you can't explain dominance, but it's left you feeling confused, overwhelmed, and creatively paralyzed. And this is despite your submissive's continual hints, nudges, prompts, asks, and sighs of disappointment. So if that's you, keep watching because you're about to get the insight you need to repair this warped power dynamic once and for all. And the first and most obvious technique submissives will use is outright disobedience. No hiding, no apology, just in your face, not gonna do it. All right? This is not about a lack of knowledge. This is not about ambiguity or confusion. This is about a mindful and deliberate no when the submissive understands they should say yes. And their goal is equally as obvious, to obtain punishment. Now, the tricky thing here is the submissive is often not actually after true punishment. They're after punishment. Okay? Because punishment often includes a lack of erotic engagement or BDSM play. They're looking for punishment. And this is the obvious conclusion because when a submissive is disobedient in hopes of experiencing their fantasy version of domination, punishment isn't what they're after. It's the intensity and power gap of being corrected, called out, and put back in their place. When submissives use defiance in this way, the punishment is simply a means to an end, a cheap substitute for what they're really looking for, which is more of your authority and fire. Another way submissives try to get more of your dominant authority and fire is through testing. And by testing, I mean small passive acts of defiance. Now, this method is often employed by more subtle, less bratty subtypes with almost like a built-in back door as means of escape, okay? And I'll explain what I mean by that. Submissives will play this card while holding an ace to their chest in case their play isn't effective, such as cleaning every other bathroom tile or washing every other dish in the sink. And this back door is used either as an escape route due to fear or an opportunity to utilize a number of the following methods we're discussing today. Either way, the hope is that you as the dominant will notice the half-ass obedience and again, correct, call out, and put their whole ass back in their place as you assert your dominant authority and power. Questioning is another tool submissives use when they want to experience more intensity and fire, and this involves subtly questioning the dominant's choices, methods, timing, etc. And let me clarify here and say that asking questions and questioning are two very different things. And it's all about the motive and method of delivery. Asking questions comes from a humble place that acknowledges you don't have all the answers and you want to learn. Questioning comes from an arrogant place that claims your way is better despite alternative evidence. And to help me explain this principle, I want to use a show that was on a few years ago, a minute ago, called Dual Survival. Now, believe it or not, I am a fan of survival shows. I will never be in nature doing the surviving, but I love watching it, okay? So anyway, Dual Survival was on a minute ago, and in a few seasons of this show, there was a contestant called Matt Graham, who was a naturist and a survivalist, and you could pretty much drop this boy anywhere on planet Earth with little more than the clothes on his back and he could survive, okay? Now let's say I have a momentary lapse of sanity and I agree to go camping with Matt for the weekend. For those of you who know me personally, you know just how far-fetched this analogy is, but go with me here. So Matt and I go camping for the weekend and we need a fire for our first night. I have zero ability to make this happen. I don't know what I'm doing. I need all the help I can get. And I deeply trust Matt's survival abilities. So I'm going to approach this with great humility and ask questions. I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm approaching it with humility and I'm asking questions like, can I help you in any way? Do you need me to collect tinder? What is the best kind of tinder in this climate? How much do you need me to collect? Do you have enough sticks and other fire material? Why am I asking these questions? Because I acknowledge Matt's expertise and the lack thereof on my end. So I'm going to be humble and take on a helper role. And sometimes in that role, you need to ask questions. But questioning is very different. Questioning Matt might sound something like, are you sure you know what you're doing? He's making the fire. I'm looking over. Are you sure you know what you're doing? What about the rain? Did you consider that? It might be wet. Is there really enough fire material? Can you really get this fire going tonight? It doesn't seem like this thing is working. Do you want me to jump in instead? When submissives use the latter strategy and question you, they're doing so with the hopes of irritating you and bringing out that aggressive energy that defends yourself and your skill set to widen the power gap they crave. Now, if you have a smart-ass masochist on your hands, you will likely be familiar with this next method, and that is sassing, running their mouth, back-talking, pushback, all that. You know what I'm talking about. Comments like, make me. What are you gonna do about it? And I guess you'll have to punish me then. You know this one. They're not just defiant in their actions, but they taunt you with their words. And again, they're after a wider power gap. And they think they can accomplish that by forcing you to be more dominant through their verbal resistance. And I've found that this is often an unspoken test of strength. Not the healthiest test of strength, but a test of strength. In the submissive's mind, it's almost this argument that says, well, of course you can be dominant when I'm obedient, but what if I don't give you what you want? What will you do about it? How dominant are you really? And this can come from a place of fear and distrust, which is why this isn't the healthiest method. But if the motive of this test is healthy, this type of test usually comes from well-trained or experienced submissives who are with a new, passive, or dismissive dominant, and they want to get a bigger reaction out of them due to complacency, inconsistency, predictability, or boredom that they're experiencing within the dynamic. So, these were just the first 4 strategies often used by submissives to widen their erotic power gap. But be sure you're subscribed and have those notifications turned on so you won't miss next week, where we evaluate the final 3 strategies subtypes use to get more dominant fire.